Thank you very much for some wonderful presentations. We now have about 13 minutes for Q&A, 13 to 15 minutes. So I would invite you to put any questions that you have in the question section, or if you want to put them in the comments section, I can read them there. And I do have one question for Satvik from our good friend and colleague, Agni. Um, and Agni says, while not advocating violence by sharing this story, we clearly see a yogi warrior who saw violence and revolutionary resistance as a higher calling. In the US, and particularly with ICE violence, which I assume everybody has seen, we see a very low bar for permission for deadly violence. And I think that what we're talking about is permission on the part of the state to deliver, I believe that's what Agni means, to deliver deadly violence. What might higher calling yogis, assumingly the warrior yogis, and other spiritual warriors have to say for this state of affairs? Yeah, this is it's an interesting question, and I would add that for about 3 decades now, I've been involved in political activism, and I've seen the violence versus nonviolence debate within political activism sort of wane and wax. It was really big during like the anti-globalization movements of the 1990s, and there was a lot of polemics there, and it created a lot of rifts in the movement. I've seen it in Earth liberation movement. I've seen it in animal liberation movements. I've seen that sort of polemic there, and it seems like you maybe want to bring that polemic to the yoga world too, or at least say that indicate that it's already there. So, do you have any response to Agni's question there, Satvik?
Yes, Professor G. In fact, Alluri did not necessarily see violence as his higher calling, but as I said, he had some version of Bhagavad Gita with him, as per the accounts. And I think he resorted to violence because peaceful methods such as petition or other kinds did not actually work, because he was, anyways, an educated man. And the only reason he might have resorted to violence, even as per what I can gather from the accounts, is that he did not have a choice. Though one can never say that I did not have a choice, because he chose to kill. But one difference is, I think in one of these verses of the Bhagavad Gita itself, Arjuna sort of tells Krishna that I feel no revulsion towards my kid. I mean, my family, the people I'm fighting against. How can I kill them? I don't hate them. And Krishna is like, when you kill with hate, that is the worst form. If at all it is necessary to establish peace or dharma, then it might not be the negative form of violence, because in certain traditions there is a positive violence, there is a negative violence, while in certain traditions all violence is necessarily negative. But here I think that might be the kind of calling that Alluri might go for, not necessarily what I mean, it might not necessarily be his higher calling. That's where I might differ a little in interpretation. Though, I mean, whatever is happening in contemporary times, especially with ICE and other kinds of situations around the world, and people killing people, it's all obviously a very unfortunate thing. But that's at least my perspective.
Okay, great. Thanks, Satvik. All right, I'm gonna just take hands in order that I see them. So I saw Dr. Dickstein's hand first. So, Dr. Dickstein, did you have a question for one of our panelists or a comment?
A question. So the question is also for Satvik. Thank you for the nice presentation. So I think a main starting point of your talk is about this is kind of the warrior yogi as a kind of a forgotten figure, um, relatively speaking. And I think it would be remiss. You mentioned William Pinch's book, but also David White's Sinister Yogis actually talks a lot about not even maybe the warrior yogi, but all of the kind of the boogeyman yogi and the fakir yogi and all of these kind of villainous individuals, which I think really fills out this broader picture. But I guess my question is, when we talk about someone being, say, a forgotten yogi or something's forgotten yoga, I'm curious what you think about what that does to the category of yoga itself, and doesn't even become legible, right? So sometimes in religious studies, we'll say something like a Jain is someone who calls themselves a Jain, or a Christian is someone who identifies as a Christian, right? It's hard to say that who's going to be the gatekeeper on who's a yogi, who's not a yogi. So I guess my question is, once we start kind of broadening this topic to individuals like you're flagging and people like Pinch and White, um, is there any more stability for even the category yogi at that point? Thank you.
Thank you so much for that very thought-provoking question, Professor. Though I hope to meet you sooner in your classes, but I never had the opportunity to interact with you before. And of course, it's a very important question as to category stability. How can we properly define a yogi if at all one can go on extending? Yeah, definitely. That is one crisis we might face, and something that haven't thought of till now. But I do think that, you see, whenever it comes to any word which gains meaning as a relation between a sign and signified, there might be many reference to it at different places which might capture a part of its definition which is not necessarily captured in the previous examples or previous reference that you might see. So from that perspective, and also believing that a thing might, I mean, again, in the spirit of anekantavada as well, I think there will still be some sort of continuity or some sort of stability, even if we go on extending the idea or the definition of yogi to a broader umbrella. Because I think at this point, after so many years of fiddling with these terms, I think it has become some sort of a nominal term. It might not necessarily in the strictest sense be some sort of a pure term that we are only exapting from canonical or pure canonical stuff from like the Yoga Sutras or other Sanskrit literature or Sanskrit works around it. Because nowadays, I mean, it was an evolving tradition, anyways. Yoga did not stop with Patanjali. It went on, and it went on to marry different traditions. Now we have Jain yoga and Buddhist yoga. So why not warrior yoga? So I think we can sort of extend it, and it's becoming nominal. I mean, I just hope Professor Bohanec might not eat me alive after this class for invoking nominalism, because we've had a discussion about that before.
I have
He's a
a lot.
non-violent person.
I have a lot to say about all this, but I'll hold my thoughts in favor of Dr. Mehta. Has her hand up.
Thank you. Wonderful presentation, Soham and Satvik. Uh, just as your beautiful names that you two have. Um, my question is for Satvik, because you have addressed and reflected on a very important question, specifically that you responded to Dr. Dixon's answer regarding category and definition. I would like to add on to that my question. My first question comes into that: are you of an opinion, after your research on this or your interest in this particular case study, and I'm looking this as a case study, your paper, that is it really necessary for us as in academia, or sometimes even as a person, to really need a category to define what is a yogi? Because in terms like, even anybody who is doing some sort of like practices that requires meditation or anything is considered to be in a larger context. If we talk about India or South Asia as a whole is a yogi, then how would you compare Alluri's the characteristic with Nihang Sikhs, right? Who are similar in context. The third question is that would you be favoring identifying and describing a warrior yogi as a militant? Because I see that in academia, across even quasi-academic work, people keep on using the word militant for yogi who have used a certain what we call violent acts. Um, so I think, yeah. So that's my question. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your compliments and that very wonderful question, Professor Ji. One thing is, your question reminded me of, I mean, the question on category again, as Professor Jonathan just put as well. It reminded me of uh, famous analytic philosopher and philosopher of language Wittgenstein, his theory of family resemblances. Now imagine there is a family of four people, and let's say there's a father and a mother, let's say, and this is the thought experiment that he does. I mean, the father has big eyes while the mother has small eyes, and the father has a small nose while the mother has a big nose. Now, when it comes to both of their children, one has a combination of small eyes and a big nose, while the other has a combination of big eyes and small nose. Now, all of them have certain characteristics which are similar, but at the same time, they are different individuals to the end of it, right? So, similarly, when it comes to, let's say, defining a yogi, or even speaking of categories, I don't think there are categories in the strictest sense out there. There are some similarities, some resemblances, some chain which is common between all of them, because they are linked to yoga somehow or the other, and because systems like yoga are evolving practice, and if at all they weren't, the canon had to stop with the Yoga Sutra. Or as some people argue that even Patanjali's yoga derives a good deal from either Jain or Buddhist traditions. I'm not sure. I think that must be all right. I'm not getting the name. So it should have stopped there. But given that now we have the Ashtanga yoga system, and it has evolved further as well, and we have had Yoga Yajnavalkya, and many more texts, many more discourses. So I don't see any problem, particularly in having a broader category, or at least the term yogi being a nominal kind, if at all anything, something which is an umbrella term rather.
Yes.
And on the question on militantness of, or I mean, the militant characteristic of a warrior yogi, I think so far I've been under the impression that I mean, warrior yogis are militants. They are such people. But at the same time, I mean, what the only sort of comparison you can draw is in terms of how militant can they get. Do they have some kind of a backing, or some kind of a rationale to what they're doing, or the kind of conflict they are battling to inflict violence? Or, I mean, do they ever reflect that? Do they ever reflect whether violence is necessary or not? I mean, these might be the parameters to again compare, but again, I think violence is inseparable there, unfortunately.
Thank
Okay,
you.
great.
I hope that
So we're almost out of time, but I do want to catch one more question from Chaitanya Prakash here. The other thing I would just insert in that conversation really quickly, it's not about me because I'm the facilitator here, but I would say that the idea of cultural sovereignty was definitely implied at in your presentation, Satvik, about how the hegemony of modern global capitalism is shaping yoga, and so then we have to extend that argument to what allows cultural sovereignty and the right to self-define, and who has the adhikar within that. So taking indigenous sort of ideas of self-definition and cultural sovereignty would be an important part of that conversation. But I'm not going to make that full comment because I'm going to instead allow Chaitanya Prakash. Chaitanya Prakash, please, we have like maybe a minute or two, please.
Okay, very good presentation, Satvik. I really like it. My question is very simple, is very historical. Actor Krishna acted in this movie earlier days. The Alluri Ramaraj's family, everybody accepted. And the RR came, the family went to the court and everywhere. But the people didn't get the support. People didn't give any support, including the legal system also. Why? What is the problem there? Whether people are not accepting Warrior Yogi, whether people are not accepting Rajamouli.
I think that's a very important question, sir. First of all, I mean, one of my favorite movies is actor Krishna's Allur Sita Ramaraju movie, which came in the 90s. It was one of the first, I mean, 70 scope films in the Telugu industry. So it's a very important thing when it comes to technological development, but I'll keep this quick. So I don't think any living descendants of Alluri exist today, because he never married, he never had any children, and there are no proofs of any of his extended family to be living in the contemporary times. So I mean, people who've claimed to be his family and have gone to court, I think it was, I don't know how reliable that is, given that he has no living family right now. But it might have to do something with Rajamouli, if not Warrior Yogi, because it's again a commercial cinema setting, and Telugu cinema is very controversial in the recent times. I hope that answers.
Okay, very good. We do have another minute or two. And I guess I just want to bring Soham into the conversation a little bit. Soham, I'm a scholar of Srimad Rajchandra, and I'm really curious about how Srimad Rajchandra's teachings have been particularly germane to global audiences. And I was wondering if you might say something about like the way Guru Dev's teachings really seem to speak to secular and non-sectarian sort of sensibilities, using some like humanistic language and all of that. And I was just kind of wondering, A, what kind of strategies do you see Gurudev's work, how it makes it particularly um, attractive to modern global audiences, and B, how does he justify that in terms of like Jain lineage and authenticity and tradition and all of that? So if you could answer that real quick, and then we'll wrap it up.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think a lot of the things from the Atma Siddhi Sastra as well can be applied to modern global audiences as well, that Shrimad Chandraji wrote. But in the context of Gurudev Chitrabanuji, I think if you look at a lot of the literature and the works that he's written, he frames it by using, I guess, non-Jain language. So instead of using, the traditional Sanskrit or Prakrit terms for the 12 bhavanas, if you look in his book, he calls them different things. He calls it, for example, the eye of inner wisdom or pure consciousness of self, to describe the different various stages. And I think by doing this, he's been able to, I guess, sort of secularize what is traditionally been Jain philosophical approaches, Jain contemplative practices, and being able to make it more attractive to those who perhaps who have not been so familiar with the Jain tradition in the past. And I think in this way he was able to attract a very large following in the US, in setting up the Jain International Meditation Center, was able to have a vast number of Western followers, and also was instrumental in helping to set up over 50 Jain centers in the US, across the USA, and was one of the sort of the founders of the Jaina organization, along with Acharya Sushil Muni Maharaj. So I think this approach that he had, where he was taking Jainism and looking at it more broadly from it being sort of an Indian philosophy, and seeing how it can be more practically widened and scoped out to a Western audience, was really, I think, where Gurudev's could have sort of struck genius in that regard.
Yeah, all right. It's such an interesting theme that we see with modern acharyas. We should really have a conference on modern Jain acharya soon. Anyway, thank you all for a wonderful and very provocative, informative, inspiring presentations. I mean, I really took a lot from all of that. I've got about 6 pages of notes, and you've given me a lot to think about, and I'm sure that's true for all of our audience members. So I'd like to now turn it back over to Dr. Christopher Miller.